Welcome to the State of Dissidents podcast. I am BC. I am your radical libertarian commentator. Today, we're going to have a little switch of pace. Rather than talk about culture or politics or what's going on in the news, I figure I would give a little bit of context into who I am and what exactly I'm bringing to this channel, to the dialogue, and what exactly I want out of all this. Short background. Into me and who I am. I was raised in an urban and suburban area. I went to suburban schools for 95% of my education. Uh, when I when I was 1 years old, my father passed away of leukemia, and I was raised in a single parent household. It was just my mother, my sister, and I. And um, I lived in an urban and suburban area, depending on which time of my life it was. But I ended up uh, going through a majority of my school years in a suburban school district, and then I graduated out of the urban high school, the alternative high school, and this gave me a fairly liberal worldview because the way I like to explain it is I was a liberal by default. If you choose to look into politics at a young age, you may choose to be liberal or conservative or libertarian or whatever. But if you don't, and you just kind of flow with whatever culture you're living in, I feel like you're a liberal by default because you only get the indoctrinated viewpoint of the school system. And I was fairly indoctrinated. I just didn't realize it until I got older. Um, Also, when I was a child, I was physically abused. I was sexually abused. So I had a pretext to the liberalism in my victimhood because I most certainly did live in a victimhood for a long time. It wasn't until I got older that I realized that the depression and the drug use were all issues that were inside of me that I had to deal with because I had this liberal type of worldview. I felt like it was everything around me that was at fault. Um, but as I got older, I started to get a little more context into our system, politically speaking, and I always had this idea that the system was broken. I just didn't know. The only I had the indoctrinated version of our government. The three branches and the checks and balances between them, but they never really give you a real political context in school. This is something you have to search out on your own, and whether that's good or bad is that it's up to you. But uh, it wasn't until around I was about 20, 21 years old, 2008, 2009, around the housing crisis and Ron Paul's rise to libertarian fame. And that's when I started to actually get a little bit of nuance into our system, and why it was broken, and what were the aspects that were broken, because up to that point I was under the assumption that it was capitalist free markets that were at fault. And then I found out who Ron Paul was. Now, when I start these podcasts, I identify as a radical libertarian, and that's intentional. Um, if if my worldview were to come true, it would be radically different than what we see today. I'm not a Libertarian Party member. In mainstream culture these days, they say you're a small L libertarian if you hold my worldview, because the Libertarian Party and um, they're not actually opposition to the duopoly that we have with the Democrats and Republicans. The Libertarian is the Libertarian Party is actually a function. It's almost as if it's a release valve because they celebrate 3% votes out of the totality of it. And a true radical libertarian philosophy, in my opinion, doesn't even have the democratic process. And that is part of why I'm a radical libertarian. I believe that if we were to have a government, it would be minimal. I don't think we need to get rid completely of the state, but it needs to be there in part only to uphold individual civil liberties, meaning it only interjects itself should somebody's civil liberties be infringed, and then it steps back. There's no other reason for our government. It's there to make sure individual sovereignty is upheld and then leave you alone. That is why it's radical compared to today. Whether you're conservative or liberal, you believe that sure, you might believe in reform or whatever the case may be, but you believe in this system. I don't believe in this system. And, it's funny, the left will call me, a radical right winger, and the right, the conservatives or Republicans will call me a leftist. It's because I don't hold traditional views. And in this country, that should be not, I wouldn't say normal, but it should at least be okay. But it seems as though if you don't espouse one of the duopolies ideologies, whether Democrat or Republican, liberal, conservative, whatever label you want to put on it, if you don't espouse one of those ideologies, you are considered radical. I'm okay with being radical. I do believe there are, at a minimum, serious reforms in our system that need to be done. Now, I don't have this general utopia that I see as being attainable in our lifetime, but the reason why I wanted to give a little context is because I was fairly radical my entire life, an outcast. Culturally, I didn't listen to much mainstream music, and my culture was just fairly fringe my entire life. And this probably had a lot to do with my upbringing. Like I said, single parent household, drug use from a young age. Although I have been sober for years now, it wasn't until I got older and had a child that this was an important value to hold. And I always seen the system wasn't right, but I never really cared enough to understand it or want to change anything about it until I had a kid. And then the turning point was learning about woke ideology, because I never really put any thought into the foresight of what I wanted from this system or what this system is until I started to understand and hear about woke ideology in academia, in the universities. And then the more nuance I got into it, I realized that it was the classically liberal view that led to postmodernism. And then from postmodernism and Karl Marx's theory, birthed the critical theories. And the more nuance I got into this, I realized that it was much more deep-rooted and it wasn't trivial like I was being told. And over the past year or two, I have been more outspoken in my views. I typically kept my political leanings and my political philosophy to myself because I didn't see any real benefit in espousing what I thought. It's that typical worldview of, one voice can't change the system. Well, now that I have a child and I like to, in as humble a way as I can, I like to think that I'm politically knowledgeable when it comes to different philosophies. I've researched into Marx. I've seen what led to Mussolini, Lenin, and Stalin. I've looked into Nazi Germany. Always my entire life, I have been very interested in humans, this human psychology, how we've evolved, and then how we governed ourselves throughout history. So I was already fairly nuanced in just history, but it wasn't until I started to realize woke ideology, that I started to get more nuanced into philosophy and what exactly this system could be, or what it should be, quote unquote, what it should be in my worldview. Now, there's often times where I speak on the system as it sits, and the immediate changes or consequences that we can see. And in in my worldview, if I had it my way, like I said, it would literally just be a government that's there to minimally ensure that individual sovereignty is there, and then it would be just a capitalist free market. We'll let the market decide, because the one thing I know for sure is that that was the defining hallmark of our founding, and that was what was so absolutely radical about our founding, and why our country has been so ideal for everybody else to want to come here. It was because we had a capitalist free market. But nowadays they say that's what's wrong with the system. But if you're being honest with what a free market capitalist society looks like, it looks nothing like what we have now. In 1913 is when they instituted the Federal Reserve, and that was essentially the downfall of our capitalist free market society. Now, given we have had radical advances because we have a capitalist society, but our free markets have been dwindling because our federal government has become more tyrannical because of their hold on the economy and free markets. So I believe that ending the Federal Reserve would be one of the best things we could do. And, I'm not going to go into a rant on that. I'm just going to say, educate yourself at a minimum on the Federal Reserve, what it is, what it does, and what they claim it's supposed to do, because it doesn't do at all what it's supposed to do. And if you want a broad look at what socialism looks like, just look at 2020 in the United States of America. We had socialism, except for it was from the lower classes to the 1%. They rerouted everybody. They closed the entire economy down, and then they rerouted everybody to big box stores and online shopping. That is socialism. The federal government interjected itself in a tyrannical movement and told us where we could direct our capital. This is the definition of socialism. This is the definition of a tyrannical government. Okay, so over the past year, I have become more and more inclined to speak out. Because I have a daughter, I actually care about what the future of this country looks like. So, I espouse what I think about culture and politics, but I want to do it in a nuanced way. And I figured the only way that I could do that is to create a channel and start making content. Now, as I speak out, I see that there is a genuine want for this kind of dialogue. When I don't consistently get content out, I am constantly having people who, whether we went to school together or it's family or coworkers or whatever, they're always like, "Oh, when's your next podcast? I'm ready to see the next episode." And it's I'm not even gonna lie, I do procrastinate because I've always been fairly introverted, and this is all very new to me, whether it's the learning curve in the technology or just actually espousing my ideology in a nuanced way in real time to what's going on today. Whatever the case may be, this is all fairly new to me as well, and the reception is more than appreciated. But I also have this side where I do worry about what you could say, what people think of me. I'm not out to, that's why I'm making this video now, is because for some reason, some people believe that I am here to confirm their biases. It's like the left will call me a radical right-winger, and then the right-leaning people will call me a radical leftist. And I will agree with you. My views are fairly radical. but I don't espouse an ideology to get people to adhere, or to get me to adhere to their ideology. What I say is literally dependent on my knowledge and how I see it. It's my worldview. I'm not here to confirm a bias. I'm not here to. The only thing I want is to sway more people to want individual sovereignty. That is my goal. My goal is, because I have had a history that is less than ideal for somebody who would run for Congress or whatever the case may be. My only option is to try and sway culture. And to create culture, I have to create dialogue. I have to create this channel. I have to make content. I have to try to espouse my ideology in a consistent way to where people can relate to it. And, there's a lot of overlap between me and conservatives or Republicans or whatever the case may be because of capitalism. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. I believe in capitalist society. We wouldn't be enjoying our freedoms to the extent we do today if it wasn't for capitalism. And there's no doubt about that. If you're nuanced in history, socialism and communism just outright don't work. You cannot arbitrarily give a government centralized power, because all it will do is become tyrannical. Now, I'm not here to. That's not the idea of this video. This video is to just place a little bit of context into where I come from, how my views evolved, and what exactly are my plans. So I come from a broken home, fairly liberal at first, and then as I see the system, I become more nuanced in philosophy when it comes to politics. Now, as of lately, there has been a lot of conversation around policing, and quite frankly, there's a tribalist take on both the left and right. Now, it's more prevalent on the left, whereas they say, it's completely broken, needs to be abolished, and all this. That's most definitely the most prevalent and tribalist take. But on the right, there is also a tribalist take that says that you absolutely have to agree with the police, and if you're not a part of the police or military, you can't criticize the police or military. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, you get a police state. And if you mention this, some people on the right, it's not as prevalent as the left and their ideology, but on the right, if you espouse that, you can't just rabidly adhere to policing, or that even if it needs reform, then you're some kind of leftist, or you're just blowing smoke or whatever have you. Now, that is a tribalist take. There is more nuance into police than that. And I feel like, it's not that radical to think that police need reform. There's a tribalist take on both sides, and it's very important that you think logically and you use your reason. Humans are humans. Humans make mistakes, and to think that any system made by or consumed by humans will be perfect, or needs to just be principally and fundamentally upheld without question is absurd. It is absolutely absurd. There are a lot of things in this country that need reform, and police is one of them. We can't have people policing our streets that take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and then they're literally just the boot of the governor. Shall not be infringed. Is that not what the Second Amendment says? Shall not be infringed, but yet they lock people away for years on end in a cage. Now, you can have your opinions on gun laws, but in my opinion, that the Constitution is fairly clear. Okay? And there's a whole swath of people in our country that are locked up for nonviolent offenses. This is absolutely absurd. We are the only country in the world that locks people up at massive rates for nonviolent crimes. And the private prisons need reform as well, because they're filled with nonviolent offenders. Yes, there is a reason to lock people up should they, violate somebody else's civil liberties. But to think that locking people up for arbitrary reasons like a God-given right to bear arms to protect ourselves or controlled substances is absurd. And there's no rehabilitation in the prison system either. It's literally lock you up and throw away the key. So to just rabidly adhere to these systems is absurd from my viewpoint, in my worldview. Now, the whole reason why I wanted to give some context is because I don't want people to think I'm here to confirm a bias. I could not tell you how much the support I get means to me and how much I appreciate that. But I am here to create a conversation. I don't want any part of an echo chamber at all. And obviously, I'm doing something right if people on the left say I'm on the right and people on the right say I'm on the left. But yet both think I'm radical. That obviously I'm doing something right because we do need radical change to our system. And I am literally here to just adhere to what I believe, stand on my principles, and talk about our culture and our politics. So, by all means, if you enjoy this content and you would like to see more of it, please like, share, subscribe, and I can't tell you how much your guys' support means to me. Every time I hear somebody ask me about when my next video is coming out, it makes me feel good. Obviously, I'm doing something right. So, by all means, like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.